All right, guys. So let's talk about the 1970s. So the 1970s, we had a lot of issues in our country. We had issues also outside the country with foreign policy. In the case of our country, we had problems with the economy, the gas shortage, some and economic instability, and at the center we had President Jimmy Carter. So let's get started here and let's talk about the economy. So during the 1970s, the US experienced a severe recession, largely triggered by a dramatic increase in global oil prices. So when oil prices go up, gas becomes obviously more expensive, transportation costs rise, businesses slow down, and consumers spend less money. And obviously, if the price of oil goes up, everything else goes up. So economic growth basically hit a wall. America wasn't booming anymore. It basically was stalling. It slowed down. Okay. So let's talk about stagflation. So this is when you have a stagnant economy and very high inflation. It usually happens, actually, inflation usually happens when the economy is growing, but this was different. Prices were rising while the economy wasn't. So the combination crushed middle class Americans, paychecks didn't stretch as far, and confidence dropped. This was one of Carter's biggest domestic challenges. All right, so let's change slide here. So what did the government do? Okay. So the government provided bailouts to try to help out some industries to prevent massive job losses. But they most importantly, they are going to pass the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977. This law made banks ensure that they would provide low income families with fair access to loans, right? Carter believed that the government could help stabilize the system, but here's the problem, right? Many Americans felt that the solution wasn't working fast enough. And in crisis, perception matters. It felt like the government they weren't doing enough. So let's talk about what was happening in the Middle East. While the economy struggled at home, right here in the US, Carter shifted his attention overseas, right? He focused on one of the most volatile regions in the world, and this would be the Middle East. Specifically, with the conflict that we were talking about, the conflict between Egypt and Israel. Now, this was a bold move because the Sinai Peninsula, where all of these guys are located in, had been a source of war and tensions for many, many, many years. Okay. Egypt and Israel had fought several wars already for territory, and this peninsula, right, the Sinai Peninsula, sits between them, right? It matters strategically and symbolically, and for many years, neither side trusted each other, right? This wasn't just for land, but it was pride, security, and identity. Peace seemed unlikely. Okay. So Jimmy Carter did something dramatic, right? So he invited both leaders to Camp David in Maryland. And if you don't know this, Camp David is like the president's retreat, basically, right? So for 12 days, they negotiated behind closed doors with no media, no public speeches, just good old diplomacy, right? They were going back and forth. Carter personally mediated discussions, walking back and forth between both leaders, right? This was very hands-on, and there was a breakthrough, right? So the breakthrough was that the Camp David Accords, one of the outcomes, Israel agreed to withdraw from the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt officially was recognized as an independent nation, and this was historic because you have a Muslim country recognizing Israel as an actual nation, right? Most other countries didn't never did this. So Egypt became the first yeah, here it is. Egypt became the first Arab nation to recognize Israel, and it was one of the greatest diplomatic achievements of the 20th century. For a moment, Carter was doing pretty good. But then came 1979, right? There was a revolution in Iran, and this changed everything. The global balance shifted almost overnight. America lost a major ally, and a new crisis began. The Shah, this is what happened. The Shah of Iran, a longtime ally, was overthrown by Islamic revolution. Now he's gonna be forced to flee the country, and later was allowed to go into the U.S. for a medical procedure. Now, many Iranians thought that the U.S. was protecting the Shah, so tensions went up. Now, Iranian Islamic revolutionaries stormed the U.S. embassy in Tehran, and this direct attack on American sovereignty, this was basically an attack on Americans in Iran, where a lot of these people that worked in the embassy were captured, and all of a sudden, it was time for Jimmy Carter to act. So 52 Americans were taken hostage. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and this crisis lasted for 444 days, right? Obviously, the US demanded the release. Iran demanded that the Shah be returned to Iran to face justice. So this becomes a global standoff, right? It was a matter of time to see, what was going to happen. And every single day that the hostage were captive, this hurt Carter's image, right? So it looked like Carter was weak. So this lasted for too long, and people just got very desperate. Okay, so there was a mission, that was planned to rescue these hostages from the embassy. Now, the only thing is that this operation failed catastrophically. There was some problems with the helicopters. Uh, some U.S. soldiers died, and this whole operation was, let's be honest, very ineffective. So this went back to Carter, and it looked like Carter's image was being basically damaged here irreversibly. Okay, so here's the twist. Um, I'm gonna skip this one. Wait. So this is what happened, right? Carter was not able to get the hostages until there was a new president in into office, and minutes after Ronald Reagan took office, the hostages were released. Okay, and we'll go back to this in another lesson. All right. So I'm gonna stop here, guys. Well, actually, here, let's do the last one. So there was another consequence. During the hostage crisis, hostility towards Arab Americans increased. There was a lot of discrimination. So in response, organizations formed to protect civil liberties and fight the anti-Arab discrimination. So I'm gonna stop here, and we'll discuss in class.